everyone. Welcome to Climate Change Roundtable, the one show out there in existence that actually provides real information on climate change instead of telling you the world is going to end. Joining me today, I can see I have a back end here where I can see everyone's faces that all you viewers can see, and I can see Sterling just kind of laughing in the background. So let me just say, joining me today is H. Sterling Burnett. Sterling, you amused by that comment?
Well, I think it would be hard to verify.
Oh yeah, I'm totally.
We're the only show that does this. Well, maybe.
I like to speak in hyperbole. Yeah, I'm not.
There you go.
I like to say we're not fake news, but that part may have been a little fake. Linnea, once again, how's the move going? Looking still, I know you're not satisfied exactly with the lighting, but still way better than my setup.
Yeah, I'm fighting the lighting all the time, buying the wrong color temperature light bulbs, all that good stuff. So we're working through it though.
Yeah. And Anthony Watts. Anthony, you're always in a new place in the United States. How are you today?
I'm on the road today. But yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm in California again, and
apologies.
I'm really looking forward to getting back to Nevada.
Yeah. Before I proceed, I was looking at articles today on California just for today's topic, and today's topic is going to be why world leaders are abandoning reliable traditional forms of energy in favor of renewables and virtue signaling and essentially, I don't know, doing what's best for them and getting reelected, I would say, instead of people. But while looking at California, I just saw that they're still having like blackouts there, or the articles would say they're not having blackouts, they're just having power outages across the state, which to be honest, I'm not exactly sure what the difference is on that one. But so you still have power, at least it looks like, because you're here.
Yeah, it's just, well, PG&E is just a parasitic organization. I dealt with them for years. I run about 100 different computers for all of my weather operations, and I still run those, but it was impossible to keep up with running a business in California that required so much electricity. PG&E has raised their rates 30% over the last 2 years, and now they're asking for yet another rate increase. And it's just impossible to keep up with the cost. Meanwhile, green energy is, the rage here, and they don't see the big train wreck coming. And in fact, the green energy thing is so prevalent and so profit driven by people that are exploiting it. I noticed something really interesting. I don't have a graph to show you, but you'll have to take my word for it. And that is the California Independent System Operator. This is the kind of the overseer for all the electric in California. This week has been showing, strains on the grid, and they've been asking for flex alerts and all that kind of stuff. But an interesting thing happened at night. The amount of power being generated by their category, solar power, dropped precipitously after sunset, which you would expect. However, it did not go away completely. It stayed at 60 megawatts overnight this week. And so what's going on there? Well, those people that are running those solar plants, those independent operators of solar power, are actually running natural gas powered generators to feed the grid at night from their solar operation because they get paid back for solar energy at a higher rate. So they're basically cheating the system.
I mean, this is just speculation, but do you think then when they report like how much solar energy they're generating during the day, that it also could be kind of cooked numbers in a way? I mean, if they're generating solar energy at night when there's no, I don't know. I'm speculating here, but that is a very interesting comment.
Yeah, well, this isn't the first time it's happened. It's happened in Europe too. We caught it on my blog, What's Up With That, back in 2009, that all of a sudden there was this power being generated at night from solar plants. How does that happen? Well, it's because they're putting a generator in there and using fossil fuels so they can get the better electricity rate return, so that they can run their plant 24/7, getting the solar energy rate, which is a big load of horse pucky.
Yeah. Now, before we proceed, I just want to throw out a comment, a little housekeeping note. We stream this show to a lot of different locations, 2 Facebook channels, Twitter, Rumble, 2 YouTube, 2 Facebook channels too, a lot of different places. So if we have people commenting all over the place. If you all want to join a central location, I would head to YouTube and look for the Heartland Institute. That's the main broadcast location. And while they're subscribed, that would be great. That helps the channel a lot and helps us spread this message. But it's always an active chat. It's a lot of fun. So just wanted to throw that message out there to all of you. But Sterling, you suggested the topic this week, which is the essentially abandoning traditional energy and virtue signaling. I thought I'd hand the floor to you to kind of introduce the topic and why we're going into it, because you're passionate about it, frankly.
Yeah, no, I've perhaps these things shouldn't affect me so much. Maybe I should laugh them off, and everyone knows I have no strong opinions about almost anything. But I have gotten angrier and angrier about politicians in Europe and the U.S. sort of throwing up their hands and saying, "Oh my God, we're short of energy. Oh my God, what can we do? Oh, we have to have emergency situations. We need to do this. We need to do that." Um, and acting as if they don't know why this has come about. We had plentiful energy throughout the 20th century, after the grid came online as they developed it. We haven't always maintained those systems properly, but when we had coal as a dominant source of electric power, as we brought on natural gas in addition, with nuclear that we weren't closing but opening new plants, we had plentiful energy. We weren't running out. When we had blackouts, it was due to an emergency. The same is true in Europe. They had an energy system that was pretty much, except for, with the exception of the US, the envy of the rest of the world, because we had one I think that would qualify as more effective. It is only when politicians got mucking around about with climate rules and shutting down baseload power for intermittent power sources through laws, through actual mandates, state power mandates, and subsidies and support, that we have this system. And so they've created this crisis. We've created this crisis, the politicians, and then they pretend like they don't know why we have faced this crisis, or they want to blame something else, a 1 degree rise in temperature, for the entire grid collapsing. That doesn't happen. That's not the case. And more importantly, we can fix it. And they refuse, or they're only on an emergency basis taking the steps necessary to fix it, to save their jobs, I suspect. But they have basically, when I was growing up, my parents always told me, we want the world to be better for you than it was for us. They were striving for progress. And these politicians seem to have abandoned progress. And so they've abandoned their citizens, or some people say condemn their citizens to living less well off. Now, I know that there are environmental scolds that want this. There are Luddites. There are, earth firsters who say back to the Pleistocene, but that's not the majority of even the environmental movement. The mainstream, not the leaders, but the members of groups. They want their air conditioning on. They want their refrigerators to run. They don't want their meat to spoil, and they want plentiful vegetables, and they want people in the developing world to have these things as well. They don't hate people. It's only the leadership that is pushing policies that reduce progress, that retard it. And it's just making me mad, because they throw up their hands and say, "What can we do? What can we do?" They know what they can do.
Maybe they don't. Politicians are not engineers. They're pretty much stupid when it comes to understanding how the power grid works. And I don't say that with any trepidation. They really are. They think that, you just plug in this green energy and it works. That's their whole viewpoint.
Well, yeah, no, their view seems to be, if we pass a law, it suddenly, laws count more than physics. And so we've taken an electric power system that was designed by engineers, and we're rapidly replacing it with one designed by politicians who aren't engineers.
Yeah, those are just theories. They're not laws. No one gets it. Linnea, I get it. All right, moving on. And wait, one quick thing. What do you posted this week? Are you saying that this here isn't progress? Just putting a generator on the back of your Tesla? I don't know. That looks like the way of the future to me.
Yeah. If you can't charge it, carry
more and more common seeing that. The Tesla owners aren't stupid. They're smarter than the politicians.
That's crazy.
But so they had to get a waiver. They had to get a waiver to do stuff like that. California, like you started at the outset, passed a law saying no more gasoline or diesel powered vehicles by 2035.
You don't have to get a waiver to put a generator on the back of your car. You do have to get a waiver to buy a new one, however, right now.
Well, yeah, but he did issue waivers. Governor Newsom, a week after actually days after he issued the warning saying don't charge his air quality board issued warning saying don't charge your electric vehicles. He issued waivers, clean air waivers, saying power plants can stay on. And even if they're violating heat rates, even if they're violating air laws, they have to stay on during this emergency. And he issued waivers specifically for electric generators. He said, you can use these. So he must have thought you needed a waiver because he issued one saying you could use these and you should use these. He told ships in ports that were supposed to plug in, according to California laws, to the electric power grid while they're in base. He says, no, keep running your diesel and your bunker fuel engines during this emergency. So they created the crisis, and then they have to issue waivers to environmental laws to keep the power on.
Yeah. And I'll go to you on this, Linnea.
They've issued a waiver for their nuclear plant, the last surviving nuclear plant in California, because they realized that if they take that thing offline, they're in deep. They're in really deep. They just can't keep the grid together without that nuclear plant.
That's not even a waiver. That's a new law that they're passing because for 20 years, Newsom and the Democrats have pushed to close every nuclear plant. They closed the second to last one a while ago in 2016. PG&E threw up their hands. They said, okay, if you really want us to close this prematurely, we will. They plan to close it by 2025. It's Diablo Canyon. Newsom supported this. The Democrats supported this. And now they are actually passing a law to keep it online to at least 2035 and to provide public funds for it. They didn't need public funds before, but now they got to provide public funds because this PG&E was planning to close it, and they've already built other facilities that they were going to have to build to replace it. So their stupidity knows no bounds.
I like the final comment there. That's just pretty good. Now, I want to share this article related to what you're all saying, which is just California power outages, how a text message averted major blackouts from the Enterprise record. And Linnea, when you read this headline, does it kind of read as if this is almost a victory? Like, hey, we managed to keep the power on by alerting you to not use the power, instead of just the reality that the power could have been on the whole time?
Well, absolutely. And I don't want to let the engineers off the hook in this case either. There are engineers staffed at all of these organizations, and they know full well what works and what doesn't. What I have read in engineering forums, grid operators forums, is that they anticipate and they would like to see a 30% reduction in electricity use across the United States over the next couple of years. That is going to be, the only way that it can happen is if it's enforced. And I guarantee that no governor's mansion, no one like that is going to be suffering the way that, especially small communities do. The idea that you're going to get a text message that tells you, stop using electricity because we've decided to build our grid on matchsticks and hopes and dreams is absurd. It kind of, as someone who, we do a little trolling, it kind of makes you want to turn on all your computers in the house and maybe run the dryer a little bit longer than you normally would just to mess with them. But you do worry about the hospitals and stuff.
Yeah, I was about to say, that's next level trolling.
Well, yeah, no, the hospitals all got these Generac big generators that get these waivers to do their diesel fuel during emergencies to run.
Yeah, you cannot have a hospital that's connected to the grid that runs on renewables. It cannot happen. Not in the first world, unless you want your hospitals to be those scheduled use hospitals, like they have in some places in the third world where they have electricity at certain times, and that's when they can run their X-ray machines and stuff. And otherwise, you're out of luck.
Your epidemic will have to wait until we get wind.
Yeah, exactly.
Please only have your child during scheduled hours go into labor during scheduled hours. They want us on these renewables because the weather is getting worse, but all the renewables depend on the weather. So riddle me that. How is that supposed to work out for us? Yeah, it's not just the U.S. It's not just California. Europe. I was just interviewed about this week. Europe, the head of the EU gave a big speech talking about how they are going to pass laws. They're going to have national governments enforce restrictions on energy use. They are going to fine or imprison you if you turn your thermostats too high during the winter or too low during the summer, if you run your appliances at the wrong time of day. This is coming to a state near you if we don't say, hold it, folks. This is not necessary. We know how to run a power system. We used to run a power system that kept the lights on. But people have to get angry and they have to do something about it. They have to tell their politicians, no more of this nonsense, and we'll replace you if you don't get it.
Yeah, it's just that the political winds have basically caused this whole thing, and the politicians are not smart enough to determine from the climate zealots what is real and what's workable and what isn't. And so they just go with the people that are screaming the loudest, and these climate zealots really do scream very loudly. I know, I've been the beneficiary of a lot of their screaming, but the bottom line is that the politicians are following the climate zealots with a belief system, and belief systems do not create a stable electric grid. And the things that we're going through now in California with these, text messages, emergency text messages, which are supposed to have been reserved for things like storms and wildfires and earthquakes, and now all of a sudden we're having power emergencies and are using the state emergency alert system for that. This is basically training the populace to get used to this sort of thing, because they don't want to be possibly generating too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, because, oh no, that'll just be terrible and the environmentalists will be mad, and we can't have that.
Yeah, it's important to note the distinction here that their ultimate goal is to eventually reach what we've already had, which is a reliable electricity grid. It's not like we're shooting for something. I mean, they're trying to control the weather. That's this is why this is better, but that's just false. But essentially, we can't even hit what we've been able to do in the past. And the most optimal outcome is we can just keep the lights on. I know I've made this point before, but we're shooting to just stay the same instead of improve. The goal is misaligned in its face.
To me, it reminds me of NASA, sort of. I've got a great admiration for NASA, but we're having problems going to the moon. We went to the moon in 1969 with primitive technology by comparison. Mm-hmm. I mean, with computers that had the memory of a single microchip today, and yet we successfully landed people on the moon. But it's taking us decades, at least a decade after we decided we're going to go back, to get back there, and we can't launch a damn ship to do it because I don't know when we gave up on the idea of making the world a better place and doing the things that are necessary to do it. Not fantasy, but the real things that we know from experience. Do you want fewer people to go hungry? Then we need more food. You know what that means? We can't go all organic. We can't. It doesn't produce enough food to stop starvation and hunger.
Yeah.
And it's down the line.
You know what? Yeah, that we've had tremendous advances, in crop production and so forth over the last several decades. And now they're telling us we're going to have to eat bugs, Klaus and his people. Well, I think the solution for that is we should make sure that genetically modified bugs get introduced, and then we can't have people eating GMO bugs. That'll just be bad, and maybe that whole thing will go away. But yeah, the whole idea, Sterling is right. They are chasing this fantasy, and this fantasy really does not better the human condition whatsoever. It doesn't make anything easier, more reliable, more affordable, or more pleasant. All of the stuff related to green energy is completely antithetical to prosperity.
Yeah, we have a comment here from Douglas Pollock. Sterling, if you have a point, go ahead and make it first. I can do the comment after.
Yeah, I saw his comment. It's spot on, but we'll talk about that in a second. But I was just going to say, maybe the solution is to eat cows and say, in actual fact, these are genetically modified grasshoppers. That you don't recognize them because we've modified them with cow genes, but that's what they are.
We've modified them with evolution.
Yeah. We got in and mucked back with GMO, and so now our insects look a lot like cows.
Yeah. So I do want to address this comment, and Sterling, if you want to take it, because do you live in Texas currently? I thought you were in New Mexico.
I do. No.
Okay, yeah, you are in Texas. All right, never mind. I take that back then. But yeah, so referring to the winter storm that killed a lot of people, do you want to just comment on what happened here?
Well, look, Texas did a couple of things, did some things right, and they did some things wrong. More than a decade ago, nearly 2 decades ago, maybe now 2 decades ago, they passed a law that deregulated the electric power grid, so you could buy from any provider. But to get Democratic buy-in on that, to get it passed at the time, to stop a filibuster, they had to make a couple of revisions. And one of them is they mandated for the first time ever a certain amount of wind power had to be added to the system. And we're still, what they did is they allowed a lot of subsidies for the transmission lines and for the wind power, and they let localities offer tax abatements and subsidies. So wind power has grown far beyond the mandated amount. And during the winter, guess what? The wind wasn't blowing when the ice fell. And by the time the wind came back, the turbines were frozen, the solar panels were covered. And so we shivered in the dark in my home, my own home. We were down to 54 degrees without power for the most part of 3 days. A couple of hundred people died. I don't think it was 400, but I could be wrong. I think a couple of hundred people died. And in part, it was also due to the power system operator. To keep the power on, they diverted power from natural gas stations, not the power plants, but the pipes, keeping the pipes warm. There, the machinery that keeps pipes warm so the gas flowing. They diverted power from those. Well, then the pipes froze up. The gas couldn't get through to the natural gas plants, and they shut down. It was a comedy of errors, but once again, not corporate. The sense of coal providers didn't do this. Natural gas providers didn't do this. Politicians designed this system because they demanded wind and they demanded solar, and it failed at a critical time. We never have power outages in the winter. Now we do have power warnings during the summer sometimes because we get pretty hot here. But I've lived here most of my life, all but about 6 years, 6 or 7 years off and on. And we've never had the kind of outages that we face now. And that's because the politicians started designing the system to incorporate intermittent power. And they tried to fix it a little bit. But the key is, if you're going to have wind, you have to make wind. There's actually laws that were proposed that I don't think have been implemented that would take the 1.8 cent kilowatt hour subsidy that wind gets, because wind always says, oh, we're generating power at zero cost. Why? Because the wind's generating and they get these subsidies so they can sell it at below cost. Take that 1.5 or 1.8 cent kilowatt hour subsidy and provide it to other companies. Say, no, look, that's a windfall for you. We're giving it to these other companies to keep them online. So when you fail, you've provided the backup. Right now, they don't have to do that. And so operators have to operate at a loss, and they can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, when they say we're doing it at zero cost, they're kind of right, because they're doing it at our cost, which is essentially what a subsidy
Zero cost
is.
to them.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Anthony, we have a comment here from Engineer Guy SC that says, whatever became of fusion power, I thought it would be here by now. What do you think about this?
You and about 100 million other people thought it would be here by now. But here is some good news. Just this last week, there was an announcement that a fusion reaction had 100 million degrees Fahrenheit had been sustained for 30 seconds. Now, 30 seconds seems like a very short time, but compared to what we've seen over the last 50 years where they've been trying it, they were initially only getting fusion to achieve in the space of, a few milliseconds, then it was a couple of seconds, and so forth and so on. So there's progress being made. If, in fact, we can get fusion working, that'll be the solution to energy issues. However, by the time we do get fusion working, I suspect that the folks like Klaus, who want us to eat bugs, and so forth, will be in so control of the power grid that it won't matter that we have unlimited, plentiful, cheap energy. They will still find a way to use that as a control mechanism for the population.
Yeah. So I want to transition a bit into what's happening globally, and I'm going to throw on screen here an article from Michael Schellenberger, who is honestly a guy that Donald Kendall, the host of the In the Tank podcast, introduced me to years ago, and he was right about him. Just a man that was a hardcore environmental zealot for a while. Full-blown renewable energy is the answer, and then eventually was hit by the reality that we can't power the grid with just renewables. It's not feasible, and there will be real-world implications to that. So let me put this on screen. The article is "The End of the Renewables Craze is Here," and we have renewables have stalled out in California and Germany. The UK announces it will frack for natural gas. South Korea cuts renewables to fund nuclear. This relates obviously to the war in Ukraine. Oh, there we go. Donnie Kendall leaves a comment. Boom, call out to Donald. Love it. Thanks, Donnie. Glad you're watching. That was pretty funny, actually. Linnea, so we can see that the UK is going to, unban fracking. Is this essentially just a shift of reality kind of finally hitting them, and then realizing that they can't just ban all forms of reliable energy and then expect things to run smooth?
I would really hope that was the case. But I've become somewhat jaded as to whether or not they actually care that it's a big issue. I think their brand new PM just announced that they're putting price caps on electricity costs in the UK because it's gone so out of control.
Yeah,
and like environmentalists point this out all the time. Every time you say, we could start new natural gas projects and stuff, they say, well, it takes a couple years to get it up and running. Well, that's true. That's absolutely correct. And what the UK needs is, stuff 3 years ago,
Yeah.
but it's better late than never, I guess. But I'll be honest, I'm not holding my breath that they're actually going to stick to it. The screeching will begin very shortly, if it hasn't already, if they actually start putting out actual drill plans and stuff. I don't see them standing. Sorry.
Yeah. That's all right. I got my dog right here. She's just old, so she doesn't do anything.
What I was saying was I don't see them holding against the pressure because they haven't done so historically. So it's a little bit of a pessimistic view, but that's where I'm at with this situation. I'm hoping, what I'm hoping is that it doesn't get, you don't want things to get so bad that they are absolutely forced to, but it really does kind of look like it's going that way, especially if we stay on the trajectory that we're on with energy prices in Europe, especially. And, their winter is just as bad as ours, if not worse in many parts. I don't see Germany feeling too good this winter, but I also don't see very much empathy from leaders over there. They seem to kind of have this, well, you should have planned for this, peasants kind of perspective. Well, what did you think? This renewable energy was going to come free? Don't you want to stop global warming? Get over it, buy a new blanket. That kind of attitude seems to be pretty prevalent over there. It's obviously disgusting. And I would hope that people wouldn't take it for very long. But, you don't hope for things to be, so bad that people are freezing to death in their homes. But statistically, cold weather kills about 10 times as many people as extreme heat does. So having bad or inconsistent electricity over the wintertime is going to be a serious problem over there.
Yeah, I want your all's comments on
a backlash politically for that.
Linnea is right. They did this before, actually. A few years ago, I covered it in Climate Change Weekly. Previous government, I don't remember how many governments ago, it's before Boris Johnson, who turned out to be a very climate alarmist guy. Well, he was an alarmist. Then he wasn't when he was running for prime minister, and then he became an alarmist again once he had power. They had plans to start fracking, and they had some communities that would that wanted it, and they had other communities that didn't. Now, this new law has that same provision. You have to get buy-in from local communities. The question is whether any local communities will allow it. My suspicion is if they get the benefit from it, say, if you allow fracking, we'll discount your power. You'll get the cheap power or reliable power, which is more important at this stage. Maybe they'll get some buy-in, but this is a lifeline. Look, this conservative government just changed. and new elections will be coming. And I think she's throwing a lifeline, trying to save the party and keep them in power by saying we're doing something. The question, as Linnea also rightly pointed out, is how long this will last. You know, if they get through the next election, if they keep office, or if Labor takes over, does this plan continue?
Yeah, you know, Linnea, I actually want to have you address a comment from Jim Lakely here, because this is a video that you recently did. We also have a previous comment that asked if you do any blog or video series on engineering issues related to energy. We literally have that exact video series. Linnea is the host of it. I produce it. So I don't remember who commented that, but go to the Heartland Institute's YouTube channel. It's called Energy Explained, or Explaining Energy. Sorry, we changed the name. And
we have to be careful. We have to change the name because I found out that the Energy Information Administration has a series with the same title. So
yeah.
I would caution you telling the guy with asking for an engineering perspective, because it's more engineering perspective than most, but it's still pretty bare bones. It's really more of a energy primer. So if you're interested in different energy resources and kind of the like most basic facts about them, and how they compare to traditional sources, or if they are a traditional source that I'm discussing, what makes them beneficial, then you can go on the Heartland website and there's a playlist, I believe, for that. So, but in regards to burning wood for energy, all of Europe is burning wood for energy, and it's actually a big problem for them over there because on the one hand, they commission all these big power plants to change over from coal to wood pellet burning. In the UK's case, most of the wood pellets that they get come from the American southeast, actually. So the trees are cut down here, and then they put them on a big old truck, and they move them over to a pelletizer facility, and they make the pellets, and then they put them on a big tanker ship, and they ship it across the ocean to the UK, and then they burn it in a power plant. And that is a green energy source,
it's renewable, though. We could keep planting trees.
We can keep planting trees. And there's luckily there's been some change of heart from the environmental left on that angle. They're starting to realize, like, you can see the little like math numbers above their head, and they're thinking, you know, if we're telling everyone that the climate emergency is right now, but what we're promising them is that in 100 years, these emissions will be taken up by the growth of new trees. Math doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. And the emissions are a lot worse from these plants, actually.
Especially since you're continuing to burn new trees every day in the plants, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like you burn them at one time and the trees you planted suddenly take up all that. No, it's a constant flow.
And additionally, so they have that, but they want to ban them for private use. So they want to ban these wood pellet stoves for private use in the UK, even though one of their biggest power plants runs on them, because they think that the particulate pollution is too dangerous for indoor use in people's homes. They want to burn
of
wood.
Regulations. Yeah, they'll try to regulate them out of existence.
So the crazy thing is, so energy prices are super high. And so they're saying, well, you're just going to have to not use your heater in the winter. And also, we're going to ban you from being able to burn wood in your home for heat. So sucks to be you guys. I guess you'll just have to not be heated at all in the winter. It's crazy. It's absolute madness.
I can just see those future TV commercials. Like, remember the old commercials, got milk? Well, now they're going to be got wood.
Yeah. Well, but they won't be got wood because they're going to ban that. It'll be we used to decry people burning books on the fire for censorship. They might be burning books in the winter for heat. Just to keep their houses warm. Turn on the stove and open it to let the heat from the stove keep you warm. Because that's what they're being driven to.
It's not just unsustainable, here. It's not just silly that they're burning wood from here and then shipping it over to the UK. They're also taking it from, less wealthy, like Baltic nations. They are absolutely clear cutting like crazy in some of those countries over there in order to put in these fast growing tree farms for biofuel. And it's been catastrophic. People in, I think, I don't want to say the wrong country, so I won't say it, but relatively small, usually heavily forested Baltic nation getting absolutely plowed down for the sake of burning wood in Germany and in the UK. It's just, it's obviously not environmentally friendly. So
they've done the same thing with biofuels, right? They've gone into Malaysia and in Indonesia and countries and harvested forests, replacing with palm trees for palm oil plants to make fuel from palm oil. Every step along the way, from the harvesting of the trees, which use machinery that runs on fossil fuels, to the shipping, to the pelletizing plant, or to in the palm oil, turning this fuel into palm oil, all require fossil fuels. Then you put them on trucks to ships that require diesel. Then you put them on ships that burn marine bunker fuel. You ship them, all of this is producing CO2. Even if the CO2 from the trees themselves were taken up, the CO2 from the process isn't being captured. It's madness. But once again, it comes back to the sort of the theme of the show, which is politicians abandoning systems that work, and we're producing plenty and progress for systems that fail. They don't work as well, despite the fact that, this is new technology. I'm always being told that I'm the Luddite because I'm stuck in 20th century, 19th century technology. Fossil fuels are 19th century technology. Biden goes out on the summit. He says, yes, coal was a wonderful thing. It brought us out, but that's the past. Well, it turns out it shouldn't have been the past because it's still better than what you've come up with since then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. I'm remembering I've done a lot of tech work with you over the years when you once told me, this is a sidebar, that computers were at their peak like 20 years ago and they've just gotten worse and more complicated since then. I always thought that was a pretty funny comment.
Upgrades. Every time I get an upgrade, it's like, this never makes it better. This never improves the performance of my computer.
I agree with you on energy. Yeah, Linnea.
Someone asked what the actual energy, the embedded energy is in the life cycle of an imported renewable biofuel. I couldn't tell you what it is once they've exported it over to the UK, but I know that just from the pellets themselves, it's about half as much stored energy per unit mass as like poor quality house coal. And it's even worse when you start talking about anthracite or natural gas or uranium. It just gets worse and worse. So it's pretty much terrible.
Yeah. So Anthony, you got something? Anthony, you're muted. Oh, there you go. I do want to, so all of this has happened, as we say, like over the last 20 years. The question is, how much of these efforts that politicians have to move away from fossil fuels actually moved away from fossil fuels? And I'm going back to the Michael Schellenberger article here, and I thought this was very revealing. So, reading from the article, but other data complicates that picture. The global economy's dependence on fossil fuels declined from just 86% to 84% over the last 20 years. Solar and wind supply just 5% of global energy, and there are so few electric vehicles that they reduce petroleum consumption by just 0.5% of global demand. So all of these problems we're facing over the last 20 years, there's California, all the rolling blackouts, all that. The effect has been to reduce the reliance on fossil fuels by 2%. And the number of issues that have come up, the number of life lost, because life is lost due to this, has grown, I would assume, by more than 2%. I mean, Sterling, when you read this, would you have assumed that we've moved away from fossil fuels by just 2%? Would you have assumed it's more? And B, what do you think about that statistic?
Well, it's all rainbows and unicorns in the belief system. That's the problem. Facts don't matter.
Trillions of dollars have been wasted in this. And, most of the growth, let's be fair, most of the growth in fossil fuel use over the last 20 years has come in developing countries. Look, in 1998, I was working for a different organization. And at the time, it was predicted that China would surpass our emissions of carbon dioxide by 2025. Mm-hmm. By 2000, it was predicted that they'd do so by 2020. By 2002, it was 2015, and by 2003, they'd actually surpassed us. Now they are double our emissions. They alone are double our emissions. India is growing. Brazil is growing. Other countries are growing, and they're doing it despite their public pronunciations. They're doing it on the back of fossil fuels. And the Energy Information Agency, the UN's own government body, says fossil fuels will still make up 80% of the energy system in 2050.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that we went down 2% with the growth in fossil fuel use in China and India. I mean, I'm surprised.
It's interesting. That was the part that I wanted to hear your response on, if you would expect it to have moved down 2%. I've seen this chart in the past where it does show emissions by country by year starting in 1960. I wish I had that on hand right now, because you can watch just the spike of China's emissions.
I just sent you a link that you can use.
All right, pulling it up now.
It shows the use of different types of fuels over the last several decades and how they are growing.
1 second, pulling it up. And
in any event, while he's finding that, there it is. Yeah, look at that. Pop that up there. There you go. Look, coal, oil, and gas they've all accelerated. Now, this only goes to 2005, granted, but this was the best I could do on the short term. But the point is that, as Sterling says, other countries are building their economies on the backs of fossil fuels. And that's exactly what happened. China, in particular, has built their economy tremendously on coal, and they're continuing to do so while they're giving lip service to the environmentalists, saying, "Oh yes, we are totally in the whole reducing of our climate impact scheme," but they don't. They're just giving lip service to it.
China is like the wizard in the Wizard of Oz, who's doing one thing and then saying, "Pay no attention to the man behind," saying one thing and then saying, "Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain," because they say, they said this was considered a great breakthrough. They said they expected in 2015 in Paris, they expected to peak their emissions in 2030 or 2035. No one asked, peak at what level? Because if they double from where they're at, who cares? But they've shown no indications they're going to peak, because they keep building new power plants that are going to be online until 2070.
Yeah. And I don't have an article in front of me, but they've recently also essentially stopped communicating with the U.S. over environmental issues.
Oh, yes. They've broken negotiations over Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats because they were doing a lot.
Oh, they were doing so much for the environment.
If only we hadn't lost their negotiations on climate change, the world would have been saved.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
I had a
well, at least something we can actually blame Pelosi for now, right?
Oh man, I don't even want to get started on her. Let me pull back to what I was at. All right. So, and then here's another interesting thing from the Schellenberger article related to California. Meanwhile, places with heavy renewables penetration are reaching their limits. The amount of zero carbon electricity California generated declined by 10% over the last decade because of less hydroelectricity from drought and the 2011 closure of San Onofre, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, nuclear plant, which was 9%. Onofre, I got that right. Wow. Which was 9% of the state's total electricity generation. In Germany, the total amount of electricity from renewables declined in 2021, even as overall electricity consumption rose. So their efforts, they're not just even reaching neutral. They're failing to even stay at the level they were at, and problems are being magnified as it continues. Linnea,
Let's talk about
there.
They're facts, and facts don't work with environmentalists. Math is hard. They can't use that stuff. We got to go for the rainbows and the unicorns. That's really the future: rainbows and unicorns.
Yeah, and it's cost billions and trillions. Yep, go Sterling.
Let's talk about Germany for a second, because Germany isn't really instructive. So they abandoned coal more than a decade ago because they had nuclear, and then Fukushima occurred, right?
Yep.
And Fukushima, by the way, wasn't in Germany. For anyone who's wondering, it was in Japan, a coastal nuclear power plant where, in a country that's known for periodic tidal waves and tsunamis and things, an old model power plant that Germany didn't have a single instance of, a single example of. And after Fukushima, the German Greens got into the government, had more influence with the government than they already had. And they said, we got to get rid of nuclear. How many nuclear plants did Germany have on the coast? Oh, I'm sorry. They don't have a great, huge coastline with nuclear plants on it. They're not an island nation. I forget the last time an earthquake caused a tidal wave that went into Germany and affected their plants. So, or an earthquake itself that affected a nuclear plant there. I think never in history. But based on what happened in a nation with technology at a nuclear plant that is not the same kind of technology, they determined to shut down the nuclear plants, and they started shutting them down. Now they've got three left that they had planned to shut down in I think the coming year. They've now decided to keep them online. They've reopened coal plants. You're talking about they had a growth in electric power despite the fact renewables were falling. Well, how did they do that? They reopened those good old coal plants and started. They haven't started mining coal, but they started shipping more coal in from Australia. It's once again, reality slapping these guys in the face. But my fear is it will only last as long as the current crisis.
Yeah, that actually was the question I wanted to ask you. Do you think this is a long-term movement, or it's just to deal with essentially the current geopolitical situation? I guess you answered it. You think it's just to deal with the right now, and then they'll go right back towards virtue signaling and doing promoting inefficient energy.
That's my fear. I just because they'll say, "Oh, but I saw this on another news program this week. They had an environmentalist in California on. They said, no. It's true that we have problems right now, but the future we have planned, the plans in place will solve this over time. So we won't need, so we have to have emergency measures, but it'll work in the future. It hasn't worked for the last 20 years, but it'll work in the future. Believe me. And I think that politicians are going to do the same.
Yeah. Socialism. Every time it's been tried, it's failed. And they say, "Oh, but the great future is coming." And that's basically the same kind of thing here with the energy thing. They're trying to make energy into a socialism sort of a thing, But going back to Germany, they've got a war on energy going on, and this winter is going to be something else for them. Maybe we should coin a new term for the Germans and their war on energy. We could call it blitzfreeze, because really that's what's going to happen to a lot of people this year.
That's pretty good.
I wonder what the German word for freeze is. Friesen, something.
I don't know, but you have to yell it very loud.
Easter kaput.
Do any of you have any? I'm trying to think if there's anything else related to the Europe situation that we should touch on before wrapping up here. We're on the 50-minute mark. Let's see. I don't know.
I was asked about Europe this week, and they said, their solution. The question was asked to me, can conservation do it? Because that's their solution. Is conservation.
Oh, that's a good
enforced conservation of energy, not growing energy. Well, I'm sorry. Do you want economic growth? Because you can't conserve into economic growth. You cut back.
When you're talking about something like that, that's kind of just a euphemism for rationing, huh?
That's
exactly
what it is. And well, it is, especially in her context, since she said we're going to be telling people not to do certain things, and national governments are going to have to enforce this.
That's the flex alerts are.
It's central planning coming to the West on a large scale. Yep. And if you control energy systems, by the way, just as an aside, you control economies, because economies run on energy, on power.
Yeah. The best way to shut down the United States isn't to attack us. It's to shut our power off. That would be the most deadly thing you can do. And that actually does bring up one comment. I'm not exactly sure where it is right now, so I'll just say it aloud. But someone commented that like some use of renewables is good, and we should support that. So I do want to comment on that and just say that I have nothing inherently against renewable energy. What I'm against is the forced use of renewable energy, and I'm not sure if you all agree or disagree with that, but renewables can be fine. I mean, burning wood is ineffective and dirty, but they're fine in and of themselves. It's when you force people to use them, and then you see these outcomes, which is in Texas where people died because there was no power during a freeze, or in California where people can't get to work because they can't charge the vehicles that they're going to be forced to purchase in the near future. And we didn't even get into the price of electric vehicles. That's a whole nother issue in and of themselves. But it's not that I'm against renewables. It's that I'm against central planning and forcing people to use them.
Our entire electrical grid was designed and built by capitalism, plain and simple. There was money to be made in providing energy for people, and that has worked well for a century. Yes, prices have gone up, but it wasn't until the Greens and the politicians got involved that energy prices started to spike unrealistically. In the past 2 years, like I say, here in California, PG&E's prices have gone up 30%. Can you think of anyone who's gotten a raise anywhere near that? No, maybe a politician, because they can vote in their own raises. But the problem is that green and renewable energy, because it's inefficient, because it's unreliable, because it requires backup and base loads and other things, is inherently more expensive. And as a result, prices are just going through the roof. And a lot of people are facing, the choice of, do I pay my energy bill or freeze, or do I eat, or do I pay my energy bill? Those are the questions that a lot of people are facing, particularly in Europe this year. And you can lay the blame on the Greens 100%.
I would, in reinforcing that point, I would say this: whether a particular form of energy makes sense based on whether it can pay its own way. If I have an isolated cabin in Montana that's off the grid, it's going to cost me a lot more to run a power line, to get a power line run to my house, than to install some solar panels or a small wind turbine. That makes sense. It also, the wind turbine can also pump water for me. That's what they've done on ranches in Texas for more than a century. But the proof that wind and solar, despite claims to the contrary, they're cheaper than gas, they're cheaper than coal. I constantly hear this. The proof that that's not true is they still require government support. Yep. They've been called orphan industries. We just have to give them some help to start up. We've been helping them to start up since the 1970s, 50 years. When are they going to get off the government teat? Every time government support, the protection tax credit lapses and they haven't renewed it, within days, factories building turbines close. If they were profitable, that wouldn't happen. They wouldn't need that 1.8 or 1.5 cent per kilowatt hour tax credit. The fact that when it disappears, they stop tells you they don't make economic sense. And that's why the costs have gone up, because you're paying, the ratepayers are paying for the cost of the technology and the tax benefits that they're receiving. But everyone's paying higher prices for energy sources that can't compete in the marketplace, despite what you hear in the news.
Well, and remind people to be cautious too when they look at data about levelized costs. And this is something I've been running into a lot with my research from the papers and the video series. It's kind of tricky the way that places like the Energy Information Administration and other organizations tell you how much things cost per kilowatt hour or whatever metric it is that they're using. In the case of solar, I know they assume that every solar array that's going to be put in is going to be one of those daytime tracking kinds that, turns with the sun to catch it all day long. And the truth is that those are the most expensive kind. And most solar facilities, most of the attempts at grid scale solar plants, they do not use that kind. They use a fixed kind in two different directions. Mm-hmm. When you drive past some of the ones that are in the southeast here around where I've moved to, that is the case most of the time, that they are fixed. So you have to understand that these costs that they give to you, even that show that these things are still more expensive, they're not even accurate to that degree. You have to be really cautious about where your data comes from, and make sure you read all of the little asterisks at the bottom, and you'll find some really impressive stuff down there, the assumptions that they make with it. And it's, usually they're assuming something like a pretty outrageous capacity factors. For one, they think that the efficiency of these things is a lot better than it actually is in practice. I did a calculation recently to determine, of all the global installed capacity for power generation from wind alone, when you average it globally, the average capacity comes out to something like 26%, somewhere in that range. Mm-hmm. And that's, think of the investment that we've put into this stuff, and to have it only work 26% of the installed capacity, or that these companies are pitching to communities that they're going to get out of these programs. Mm-hmm. No gasoline powered vehicle that promises, this size of a gas tank, but only delivers 20-something% of that would sell on the market anywhere. No one would accept that.
I like that.
The Brabant in East Germany was a good example. But I want to say there's another hidden thing in the future that's looming about these renewables, particularly solar panels. Solar panels, you talked about their actual production, something like in the 20% range. Well, they decline their efficiency over time. There's a very well-known curve for silicon crystal type solar panels, and they decline over time with their efficiency. And so as a result, their ability to produce electricity 20 years into the future starts to get curtailed significantly. Most solar panels produced in the last 10 years have a typical lifetime somewhere in the order of 20 to 25 years before they're no longer efficient enough to really keep online. So what's going to be happening in the future is not only reduced efficiency, reduced production, but then we're going to have a problem of replacing the darn things. And replacing them is going to be hugely expensive. And so they're going to pass that off to the consumers as well. So if you think electricity prices from solar energy are high now, just wait.
Huge waste problems created as well when those things come off.
Right.
And he's talking about 20 years in the future as they lose efficiency. Look, if you don't keep them clean, they lose efficiency. You want to go up on your roof and clean those panels regularly?
Oh, the water use in California, the water use to keep solar panels clean, I can only imagine.
Yeah, and they're already struggling with water problems.
Yeah,
and they've got wildfires dropping soot on these things all the time. Great efficiency in these solar panels. It's madness. It's policies only a politician that wants to control how you live and keep you living less well could love.
Yeah, I predict that in the future we're going to see on power bills, and it'll probably start with PG&E and California, there will be a solar panel disposal fee that will show up on your power bill. Now, they've already got it for electronics, for example. If you go out to Best Buy or something and buy a new LCD TV, there is an $8 to $15 fee, depending on the size of the thing, attached to that now for a disposal fee for the TV. Just wait. You'll see those show up on power bills. I predict it.
Yeah, California does
have a solution. You have to have them on all new homes, and then they want to charge you a special disposal fee for what they've mandated. North Carolina is maybe instructive too. So Dominion Energy pushed along with the government of North Carolina. They want the big offshore wind. Now, offshore wind is much more expensive than any other source of energy, but they want this. And they estimated what the capacity factor of offshore wind would be, in all their sales documents to the government, to the legislature, and to the governor. And so the state agency involved in licensing these things said, okay, we'll go along with your scheme, your very, very expensive scheme, so long as you can guarantee the capacity that you're promising. Dominion says, what do you mean? Guarantee. So Dominion's not signing off on the guarantee, and they say, well, if you don't guarantee it, or at least guarantee it or some other source of energy to provide, then we're not going to license these things. And so it's not clear Dominion's going to go forward after spending a lot of money because the truth is their sales documents are just that. They're sales documents. When I went to a Society for Environmental Journalists conference back in Pittsburgh over a decade ago, I was sitting next to people from an energy company here in Texas that's very big on wind. And they didn't know who I was, and they were telling me all these good things about wind. And I said, well, what's the capacity? How often? And they said, oh yeah, our plant in Pennsylvania in these mountains where we built it, they're at 35%. I said, really? That's pretty good. I heard it was less than that. So we get there, we actually take a tour, and we go to their plant, and there's the plant manager. You can see turbines for as far as the eyes can see on the tops of mountains that have been cleared of trees for these turbines. And not a single one of the turbines is turning. And he was speaking to the journalists, and they asked him, so what's your capacity factor? And he says, we're very proud we reached 20% this year. So the salespeople were saying one thing, the ear on site was telling you quite a different story.
I mean, I wish Anthony's at a hotel and he's checking out now, so they cut his Wi-Fi. But he shared this earlier in the week. California, Gavin Newsom, he's playing 40 chess. He's just making sure everyone leaves for Florida, and then the renewables will cover the entire state. But unless either of you have a parting comment, we're at an hour and a minute, so it's time to wrap up.
Yeah, quick on Dominion. Yeah. So Ed Reed has mentioned them a couple times, proposing no storage for the offshore wind. There's been all sorts of fights in the deep water offshore stuff because the transmission line fee is super high. And they're talking about, it's the ratepayers who end up paying for this stuff. And the cost to the utility themselves is outrageous. There is a word for what's going on with the offshore wind, and that is graft. There is no way that these numbers are adding up right in anyone's heads. Someone's getting money under the table somewhere, and it's pretty bad. As someone who just moved to the Southeast, Dominion is now on my radar, and I already don't like them. So,
yeah, when you make that comment, you want me to get into like libertarian ideology, but we're at an hour and 2 minutes, and I can go on forever on that. Sterling, anything to wrap up with, or are you good? All right, well then let's conclude here. Thank you all for joining Climate Change Roundtable live every Friday. As I said hyperbolically earlier, the only show, I'm kidding, providing realist information on climate change. We were live last week with Stanley Goldenberg doing the hurricanes. He makes predictions for NOAA, the organization that the media uses to talk about how many hurricanes are coming. It was great. It was really informative, and he actually got into the nitty gritty of how those predictions are made. I advise you all, if you weren't here last week, to check it out. Outside of that, I don't know what we're doing next week yet. We always plan it during the week, but if there's a big development, we will cover it. Subscribe to the channel. It really helps us. Share it with your friends. YouTube does not like the things we talk about. That's why there's the little banner below this video that says like climate change is universally agreed that it's being caused by humans and is catastrophic, or whatever the banner is now. They recently changed it to the United Nations. So share, subscribe. It helps us out. Pushes back against YouTube's algorithm. And outside of that, we will see you all next week. Peace.